Welcome. I would like first to thank Chiara for having suggested my name to moderate this panel. I'm deeply honored. Thank you very much. I'm the Bloomberg Paris bureau chief, and there's something I need to tell you before. When we accept to moderate a panel, it has to be pro bono, and there's another standard, which is we need diversity in all possible way before we accept a panel. So this one was really not a difficult one to get accepted by my hierarchy. This is such a vast topic. It was very difficult early on when we tried to prepare for it to sort of narrow it. It doesn't seem right to narrow such a topic. And who here doesn't fear to be left on the sidelines? Who here is not currently fighting not to be left behind? And let me take you back to, alas, the French news flow. Part of the Yellow Vest movement was surely stemming from the fact that some feel they are left behind, they are not included, they are scared of being déclassés. Brexiteers' votes as well probably explain that some are feeling left behind. Some places in the United Kingdom are thriving and some others are absolutely not faring well. And I suspect as well that it's perhaps the same momentum that explained why Donald Trump was elected the President of the United States. So, and it starts very early on to feel excluded, or not to feel included, rather, in the schoolyard, and then tuition, and later at work. You're a girl, you're a boy, you're black, you're Asian, you're thin, or you're not, you're shy, you're too outspoken. Who knows what could be the reasons for you not to be included? We have come at a time when it's actually mandatory to realize that inequalities and exclusion are not working. So that's great. We're realizing this. But have we reached the next stage, which is we act upon it? And this is why I'm very, very fortunate here to be joined by Sandra Sancier-Sultan, who's a senior partner for McKinsey Company. Round of applause, because she's very, very expecting. Baby is due in a week time, so we are very fortunate to have her here. This is dedication, right? We're also very fortunate to have with us the Vice President and Managing Director of HP, Elizabeth Moreno, who's currently based in South Africa. She's more than just the female CEO of the French blue chip companies. She's really more than that. Please welcome Elisabeth Kocher. She's the CEO of Engie. And because we need diversity on this panel, here comes the wonderful Maurice Lévy, who is the chairman of Publicis. So I'm very fortunate, like I said, to have been joined by you. Thank you very, very much for being here. And I'm going to kickstart this conversation with a question, which is for all of you. So we said it's very wide, inclusion, exclusion, very wide. What would be your focus very specifically for you? Where would you see the first front line for you, the first baton line? Please, Sandra.
So you defined inclusion a bit earlier, and I loved it. For us, inclusion is for every employee to come to a company bringing his or her full self. And so, yes, we believe inclusion is absolutely critical. All the more so that we do know it is absolutely critical to make gender equality happen. And so you asked me my focus. I think inclusion is critical, but I do think that it is also critical to make sure we make significant progress in one of the big dimensions of diversity, which is gender diversity, where we are not yet there. So some progress, as we spoke earlier, especially in the country where we are. In France, we have moved over the last 6 years 12 percentage points, so from 9% of women in executive committee in CAC 40 companies to 21% this year. Overall in Europe, 20%. So this is quite good, but it is far from what should be the place all the great women in this assembly should aspire to. So inclusion, yes, but gender diversity at the core.
Elizabeth.
Well, Geraldine, as I accumulate a certain number of diversity, the choice was very difficult. But I currently live in a continent where 65% of the population is behind 35 years old. And 48% of the entrepreneurs are women. So these two topics are particularly close to my heart because indeed, working in technologies, these digital native people certainly need to be empowered through the tools. But beyond that, you know, I will speak about that a bit later, but South Africa, the country where I live today, is a land where you can experiment so many exclusion, so many inequalities, and at the end of the day, you have to start somewhere. And I decided, as the CEO of HP Africa, to start with the youth and the women, because I think they are the future of the world.
Okay. Thank you. Madame Kocher.
I believe for a company, the enemy is sameness. That is to say, everybody thinking the same way, having the same background, because it means a system that is not creative, that is not really able to reinvent itself. And we are at a moment, I believe, where we have to rethink the way we manage business deeply. I believe we all experience that. And in that, especially at that moment, at this very moment, it is critical to create diversity. And I agree, the first one, at the core of that, we have the gender diversity. It's 50% of the population of the planet. And then we have, of course, to deal with that. And I own a company in the energy sector. It's true that we have a pipe, a pool of talent that we have to create, because I visited last week some institutes training young guys. In fact, I say young guys because the reality is that they train young guys. They have a very few number of young ladies following this kind of training. So we have to organize that diversity and to create the pipe of talent and to motivate young ladies and to change the way this generation looks at industry. So this is something that is at the same time ambitious, I would say. We say 50% of women in our pool of managers. We have 30,000 managers, so you know it means a big number of young ladies trained to become key managers of our company in the 10 years to come. So it is ambitious, and at the end, it is absolutely normal. I cannot see how I could give another objective than 50 per 50 for our community of managers. But it is a big challenge we all have for the period we just entered in, which is a period of deep transformation. I believe, again, inclusion is key to just be creative enough to master that challenge.
Maurice.
First of all, I have decided to have long hair in order that I could be part of the majority of the room. But I'm failing because I should have taken more time to do it. Regarding the issue of inclusion and gender equality and all the problems which are related to this, it is a humongous task for any corporation in the world. Governments have failed in doing their job, particularly when you look at some aspects, which is regarding immigration and how we have tackled the issue of immigration to prepare the people to take jobs and to be part of the majority and to succeed and thrive. It has been a a problem for years, and now the society is not accepting the situation as it is, and we, as corporations, we need to speed up the process of integration and inclusion. So we need to address the issue of gender equality on all aspects, from equal pay to getting jobs at the executive committees and the top jobs. We have to address the problem of diversity. We have to include the problem of disabled people and make sure that they have access to the jobs and can thrive. So all this is something which is, as I said, an enormous task. And we at Publicis Group, we are fortunate because since the inception of the group, it has been a rule by the founder in the very early 30s to give a chance to everyone. And I will surprise you by saying that the first woman CEO in the advertising world was a woman who has been chosen by Marcel Bleusen-Blanchet, the founder of Publicis, in 1938. And since then, we have always tried to make sure that they have access to all the jobs. So our issue is enormous, as everyone in the room. It's not something which is easy to address, and we are determined to make it happen, but it's not easy, particularly when you have also to deal with competitiveness and the fact that you have other issues to address at the same time. But we have to do it, and we cannot discount that aspect.
Thank you. Well, you actually had a very good point, Maurice. You mentioned competitiveness, and I'm going to ask you, why would we do this? Because it's the right thing to do to be more inclusive, or because we need to do it? After all, why should inclusiveness take precedence over economic growth, over a company's growth, over the environmental protection? I know it's a nasty question to ask, but I have to ask it. Go ahead.
That question gets me very excited all the time, because actually I think the case is so clear. There's no one or the other. When you look at companies where there's more women at the top, you see a difference in performance between 45 to 55%, depending on whether you look at EBITDA or ROE. We did the same work with ethnic diversity. Guess what? We found out the same thing, a difference of more than 35% in economic performance. And if it's not enough, diversity in the economic performance, let's look at how companies operate. When we look at companies where there's more diversity at the top, so the best-in-class companies, they operate with the management practices of the future. Isabelle, you mentioned it. They operate with management practices that are the ones of agile companies, much more open and trusting environment, much more collaboration, and these are facts. So for me, it's not a choice, it's actually an imperative.
Yeah, I'm gonna look. When we think about the market where companies operate, the markets are very diverse, right? When you want to sell your product to somebody, you do not look at the gender of the person, you do not look at the color of his skin, you do not look at, you don't care, provided that person want to use your product. Would you build a house if nobody want to buy it? Would you, we, companies, are here to serve needs. And the needs, whether you are in Europe, in the US, or anywhere in the world, you're just serving people, independently of who they are. So why, in our companies, wouldn't we have people that represent the people we are supposed to serve? Why are we always interested in the money that they can bring us? And as soon as we have to provide them with job, suddenly we remember that they have a different religion, they have a different gender, or they have a different color of skin. It doesn't make sense. Our companies need to represent the people we work for. And this, to me, is an obvious reason to be more inclusive.
Isabelle.
For me, there is no doubt. I mean, the more we are inclusive and more generally, the more we act for good, provided it is true, transparent, proven, with a good level of traceability, because we live also in a period where people, they hate fake news, probably more than before. But provided it is true, and provided you are able to demonstrate that, you are more attractive. It's not only, by the way, regarding inclusion. It's, I believe it is a broader topic. So acting in the energy sector, which is, of course, regarding CO2 emissions, really first online, I can tell you we were a very big CO2 producer by definition, because we were used to build a lot of plants over the world. So we built over 30 years many plants in a lot of countries, and we became first CO2 emission in the world, almost number 3. And we realized that we had a choice to make, either to continue it and try to prolong, maybe a bit cynically, the cycle, or to transform ourselves. As you know, probably we chose to effectively, deeply transform ourselves, decided to become a leader of a zero-carbon world, taking a risk for that, accepting to stop activities, 20% of our activities, which is for a listed company a lot. But we were convinced that doing so, we would be rapidly more attractive. And it was a bet. It was a bet, or it was an intuition, as you want. But the good thing, which is, I believe, encouraging, is that you don't need to wait too much. We decided that, we rapidly demonstrated that it was real, and we saw almost immediately clients coming more. We got more clients year after year. We accelerated concretely our growth pace. And it has been visible also on our economics. So on clients, it is almost immediate. On talents, this is probably the most impressive. To give you an idea, we had in 2015 and the years before, roughly 250,000 resumes per year, spontaneously sent to the group. We announced what I just said, zero carbon, and more inclusiveness, including women, and specifically on women. And we got year after year more and more resumes. And today, last year, more specifically, 2018, we were at 800,000. So client pool, extremely clear. And we are fortunate enough to live in a society that is really expecting something. So client, it is extremely visible and rapid. Talents, the same. So it's a question of creativity of the system you create if you manage to be more inclusive and more responsible. It's also a question of attractiveness vis-à-vis external world. So, and that's the reason why I believe we see more and more companies moving faster and faster, not yet enough. That's probably something we could debate also. But it is moving for this reason. It is business for good can be good business and is more and more good business. We have not to oppose the two. This is, I believe, really a key element that has to encourage all of us to go faster.
That's a slogan that Publicis could have invented. Business for good is good for business. Maurice?
Clearly, when you can state that you are doing things good, it's good for business. And today it is something on corporate social responsibility, which is considered as a good value. And when clients or partners are looking at the company, they are taking into account these kind of criteria. So it's something which is positive. So you can look at things through two lenses. Under one angle, you look, okay, am I a good company, a good citizen in a good country, and am I doing the things which are right regarding society? And obviously, by being more inclusive, you are doing something which is right. Then you have the other angle, which is the angle that you have to take into account, maybe on a priority basis, which is, as a CEO, I'm no longer a CEO, so as a chairman, but let's speak on a general basis. As a CEO, am I doing the right thing for my company? Can I grow? Can I have a profitable growth? And am I doing the things which are right for managing my clients and for growing the company in the future? There is, in our case, something which is extremely important, which is we are a talent company. We are not a company which is selling a product. The only thing that we are selling is brain juice. And something which is relatively easy to look at, and you can go through any kind of biological documentation, you will see that brains are the same. And brains, when they are beneath the, inside the head, has no color, has no sex. And what you have to bet on is the talent. You have to see, okay, is that person able to bring new creative ideas, able to manage in a way which is interesting a client and take him or her to the next level and bringing the most interesting solution of the future. In our field, there is, in fact, two different aspects. One is all the communication, and I must say that women are essential, not only good, essential in our business. We do advertising which is consumed by the majority of the population, and at 75 to 80% by the women. So it is extremely important that women play a key role in our organization and be leaders on their own right. So that is something which is working well, and we are doing something which is far better than any of our competitors on that field. And we are extremely happy and very pleased with that. Then there is the other aspect on which we are developing a lot, which is a technological aspect, where we have engineers, and we are using, for example, a lot of engineers in India and in some other countries, Costa Rica, and we are also helping a lot of our clients on technology, data, etc. In that field, unfortunately, it is unbalanced. And we have a lot of work to do in order to get these aspects of our business at the level where we have the rest of our business. And this is a bit tough, because what we need is to have the academy, which is, and the universities, which is giving us the talent. And this is an area where there is scarcity, not only as a talent as a whole, but particularly when it comes to women. You can get any statistic, and you will see that most of the university was delivering this kind of talent deliver roughly 70 to 75% men and 25 to 30% women, depending on the universities. And when you look at the situation in the Silicon Valley or in some other area, you see that maximum is about 20%, and when you go to AI, it is 10%. So we have a lot of work to do in order to catch up with the rest of the group in this field. And we are working very hard on this.
Yeah, I'd like to add something on that, because I have never, ever met a CEO who has not put diversity in its priorities. Never. The question is it a priority number 3 or 11? And indeed, Isabelle mentioned it. When you can choose the kind of company you want to work for, you would rather choose the company that share your values. So indeed, it is very important to mention that. And the new generation that are coming, for them, these values are even more important for us, the oldest, who just needed to take a job. That said, it's one thing to put diversity in your strategy. It's another thing to have it in your culture. And I'm going to name 2 examples that will ring you a bell. One of the most exciting tech company, I call it a tech company because Uber. Do you remember that the CEO of Uber and a board member had to resign recently because a person who had left the company wrote a book about the kind of things that were happening in the company, and women didn't feel safe working for that company. The other example is H&M. Do you remember a few months ago, H&M had this beautiful idea to have a nice advertisement, and I'm sure that there was nothing wrong behind that. But they had this beautiful shirt, and on the shirt it was written, "I am the coolest monkey of the jungle." The only problem is they have chosen a young black boy to wear this shirt. So, I mean, there is no problem, and these t-shirts were absolutely cool. The problem is that many shops of H&M have been destroyed by people who were furious because of this racist connotation. So yes, everybody today is thinking about diversity, and nobody can escape. The companies that believe that they can escape diversity, forget it, because the world is global, and whether we want it or not, we will have global people buying our product and working with us. The thing is, beyond the fact that we accept that diversity is important, we need to have in our company diverse people who would tell you, hey, be careful, you cannot put this kind of shirt on a black boy. That's obvious, no?
Just wanted to not add to your story, which is fabulous, but more thinking about the point of what does it mean to build an inclusive culture? Because that's easy to say, that's not so easy to do. What we have done at McKinsey is try to think of what are the dimensions that will then reflect into inclusion. We came up with 3. One is openness. It means that you are in your company, you can bring your thoughts, you can bring your ideas, and they will be accepted. The second is equality. Are you going to be treated fairly? And the third one is belonging. Do you feel that when you come with your full self, you actually can connect to your fellow colleagues? And so for some of you, many of you actually in the assembly, we ask you some questions on these 3 dimensions. So we surveyed the Women Forum participants. And I know you're a very biased sample, but still, I just want to bring a bit of optimism to our discussion. Most of you believe that your company is actually doing really good on inclusion, except on one dimension, equality of treatment. You could say, that's great. But now let's look at the difference in gender. And when we looked at the women among yourselves, then we see all the scores drop. They drop on 2 dimensions in particular, not surprisingly. Equality of treatment. What's much more new to me, at least, which I could relate to, is the openness. So for women, and for you women in this room, it seems to be much more difficult to openly share your views, your thoughts, your conviction. And why is it a problem beyond being really painful? We don't want to live painful lives at work. Well, when we looked at the implications, it means that for more than 40% of women in this room, you have either not accepted a job, not accepted a promotion, or not joined the company. So to your point, making sure you address these inclusion topics is like absolutely critical to make sure you attract the talent and you retain them.
I wanted to add something which is part of the competitiveness, and without insisting too much on Publicis, we believe that a position on diversity has helped us a great deal. If we look at what was the situation in the early 90s, the world was about homogenization and Americanization. And we were, in those days, a relatively small company on the planet of advertising world. And we came very strong with a very strong idea, which is still a mantra at Publicis, which is Viva la différence. And we said, no, we are not American, we are not belonging to this world, but we respect everyone, every culture, every single individual in the world, and we will build a place where diversity will be celebrated. And we want not only that diversity is celebrated, but also we want that the advertising that we will be developing is not the reflect of one culture, but if possible, the reflect of the culture of the company and adapted to the culture of each country in order to respect the culture of the countries. And we came up with that positioning, and at the end of the day, what happened is that we have been extremely successful because in the world of globalization, what people didn't want to see is homogenization. They didn't want to see that everyone is the same, that it's a cookie-cutter approach, and that we just have to deliver. No, and we are extremely respectful in each of the countries where we play, and we have seen the development of the people in our organization, where they have all the possibility of raising to the top whoever they are, from ever culture they are. And what we did on the women is to develop a program which is a grassroots program, which is built by the people themselves, and the only thing we are doing as a corporation is to help them. And we created the first program, which was Viva Women. The management has nothing to do with Viva Women. We don't want to interfere. We want that it is the women of the group who are taking this as a very important task in order that people can get coached, mentored, possibility of expressing themselves, etc., etc. And we do the same with the LGTB people with Égalité, which the name came from a team in the US. And it is a program that they are managing and that they are developing. And I believe that that kind of respect and attitude, which is, again, back in the roots of our group, is something which is extremely important, that it is good for the company, good for the business, and also very good for the people in the company because they feel that they are treated on an equal basis.
Thank you, Maurice. So we're talking a lot about companies and what they can do and what they're trying to do. Isabelle, first question to you is I would like, Maurice explained this Publicis example, but I was wondering concretely, what do you do to actually have more inclusion, more diversity of all possible kind? And then let me ask you, the whole of you, a second question. so we talk a lot about companies, but what should we expect about governments, about the authorities? Could it be something more affirmative, more restrictive? I'm pretty sure that without a French law, the representation of women within boards wouldn't be so high as right now. So do we need that? Some very authoritarian from the governments, for instance, or not? So first question, the concrete way of what you're doing currently at ENGIE, very briefly, and then my second question.
Well, to say the truth, we all say the same, finally. We all say this is needed, it is good for company, it is good for attractiveness, it is good for creativity, but we are not going fast enough. That's very clear, very clear. I have to say, we made a lot of positive decisions regarding diversity, gender diversity in particular, but we didn't move at the right pace. And we moved more rapidly on CO2, in fact, than on women diversity. CO2, we decreased by 50% over 3 years. Our CO2 emissions, it was considered that crazy, but we did it. And if I look at women, I doubled the number of women at ExCo level, which is, because I considered that it had to start by the top. But I have to say that if I look at the entire company, and if I look in particular at the managers community, it's not true. We increased by a few percent, which is already something, but not enough. And I decided to do exactly the same as we did for CO2, setting crazy targets. Crazy targets. I really believe only on that. If you set crazy targets, you are forced to reconsider, revisit, white page. And then we said we'll double the number of women in the pool of the 30,000 managers worldwide. So people told us, impossible. It is impossible, even don't try, even. And we said, yes, this is the only possible target, 50%. And 2030 means we have 10 years. We have 10 years to fuel the pipe of talents, organize it, revisit our processes, and this is something we didn't discuss probably enough until now, work on our bias, our cognitive bias. I progressively realized that this is probably the most important point, and if you share that, I am impressed by the bias we ourselves also we have. For example, when we review the pipe of talents, when we consider candidates to take a job, I see questions coming on women candidates as, is she able to impose herself? Probably nobody would ask such a question for a man. And it is, and these questions, they are asked by, people who are extremely supportive. So that's really something deep we have to it's really a question of bias we probably are not even aware of. So I decided to impose tests in our company to detect this bias, all of us, even the women, to progressively work on that. By the way, it's not only true for, regarding hiring people. I recently met a collective of women entrepreneurs, SISTA, I don't know if you know them. So this is a coalition of startup founders, women founders. And they told me something I was absolutely not aware of, which is that only a few percent of funds are invested in startups funded by women. 3%, if I remember well. So it means, and they told me the same. They told me when we propose a project, we are asked, about the way we will manage our family, the way we will manage our time. So a set of questions that is absolutely probably out of normal considerations. So to work on bias is absolutely critical. It's not enough. We have to set very ambitious policies. We have to set systems. We set up monitoring systems, which will continue to grow. To, of course, organize, I said before, the training system. But to work on the soft part, I really went to the conclusion that it was probably the obstacle we need absolutely to explicitly address.
Thank you. And so my question, should we expect authorities to step in or do something more stringent or force us to be more diverse, more inclusive? Go ahead. You're based in South Africa. Should we expect that from the South African authorities?
Look, I'm not expecting anything from our authorities. I think they did their very best, and see the progress is not that amazing. But I'm sure they tried. I think, you know, for the very first time in the human history, we have all the necessary resources, necessary capabilities, necessary technologies to solve all the problems of the people in the world. And still, we are seeing people starving, dying in the ocean because they are trying to cross and find a better life elsewhere. Still, we are seeing less than 10% of the people in the world holding 80% of the wealth. One of the major issue of the future, Maurice mentioned it, is immigration. It took us years to deconstruct le mur de Berlin, the Berlin Wall, and today, everywhere in the world, you see mature companies, mature countries building new walls because they don't want the poor to come into their countries. Fair enough. We can understand that. And this can work when you have 100,000 migrants trying to escape climate change, trying to escape poverty. But in 20 years, and maybe less than that, we will have billions of people living in slums who will not accept their conditions. And these people, there is no wall in the world that will prevent them from trying to survive and live with dignity. We have to have this in mind. The good thing is, business leaders are problem solvers. Our companies wouldn't exist if we didn't have any problem to solve. So I have more trust and hope in business leaders and large companies because they have no boundaries. A CEO has no limit. Isabelle can do whatever she wants. And you see? I mean, roughly. Okay, roughly. But think about this. Military leaders have some limits. Religious leaders have some limits. Political leaders have some limits. But when you are a CEO and you have a vision for your company, you can realize it. If your vision is good, you can realize it. So I have more hope with business leaders than institutions.
There you go. Sandra, very briefly. Sandra, you want to say?
You know, at McKinsey, we like facts, so let me bring you a few facts to answer your question. I think for me, the answer would be very different if we talk about Europe, US, developed countries versus developing countries, and even within the developing countries, there's huge differences. What we have found is that in any region, there's huge economic potential in getting more women at work. We are talking about 12 trillion. So when you're looking around and you think that there's no growth, there's huge growth potential. For Europe only, it's 2.1 trillion of growth. At the same time, in some countries, in some regions, what is at stake is actually things like violence against women, equality in legal rights, and then education, and last, the companies and the way the job they operate in these companies. In these environments, yes, you do need some public action to level the playing field in legal rights, to do things against violence. When you look at Europe, I was still frankly appalled by the numbers on violence. We do have some discussions in France where we are today around violence against women. So yes, there are things that can be done there. At the same time, I'm completely with Elisabeth. What can be done by companies is just huge. And that's the main reason being that for the last 40 years in Europe, we have produced more women out of our secondary education than men. So what's going on? I think the number of women out of French university was 55% in the 70s. And where are they when we look at the number of leaders in the CAC 40? So there's already the pool of talent. There's huge things to do if you talk about countries where the level playing field in terms of legal right and in terms of violence is there.
Maurice et Isabelle, très brièvement, parce qu'on n'a pas beaucoup de temps.
Regarding what you expect from the government, I would like to join Isabelle and everyone on the panel. I think that first, government have more than before a lot to do, and I'm happy to do not be a politician because I don't know how to solve a lot of the issues, and as Elisabeth said, we are problem solvers. What I would expect from the government is clearly to take care of education, health, and the key fundamentals. I'm not asking them to solve the other issues, but if they can take due care of education, health, integration of the immigrant, and making the fundamentals right in the country, this would be enough, and then corporation can play their role and do what's right. Now there is maybe one or two things that I would like to say which are in complement. The first thing is that personally I have been experiencing one thing for which fundamentally I was against. I was fundamentally against quota. And when I was the chairman of AFEP, which was the organization for the largest company in France, I decided before the French law that it should be good to have a quota. And we decided that we will have 40%, and then there has been the law. And I must say that this has been a great accelerator. So when legislators are taking these kind of steps, which is something which help momentarily, it's despite the fact that it's not good by itself, it's good because it forces management and boards to look at the things differently. And I think that is something which is good. And I know, Geraldine, that you want to stop. I do stop.
Maurice.
Well, I don't like quota. I follow you on that point, and especially if they are short-term. But I believe that governments can play a role creating conditions. By the law, an example, we spoke about inclusion of women, but we can also speak about inclusion of young people. You know that we are in a country where the level of unemployment of young people is huge, crazy. And at the same time, in a group like ENGIE, we have only in France almost 3,000 jobs that we cannot staff. We cannot staff. We have 3,000 open positions. Can you imagine that in a country where in some regions we have 25% of unemployment for young people? And we worked with the government, and we worked on the reform of apprenticeship. And they managed something very efficient. And on the basis of this new framework, new ecosystem for apprenticeship, we increased massively the rate of apprenticeship people. In our group, we will move from 3% to 10%. We'll triple. So here the governments, they have really key role to play. Even if we are, as companies, we have to act. They cannot do at our place, but they can create conditions for us.
Thank you. So it's been a fantastic discussion, obviously. Hold on, I'm not finished. So it's a vast array of exclusion is just everywhere for everything. But we agreed here that gender comes as one of the top priorities. Actually, as Sandra and Elizabeth said, you have to start somewhere. There's youth, of course, and Maurice mentioned that indeed somehow the governments have failed into preparing the youth and others to be part of growth. And cooperation actually can do their bit. Sandra pointed out that there is no choice to make between inclusiveness and the rest, economic growth or earnings profit. They're higher when there are more women and more diverse people at the top. That's for one thing. Another one that Elizabeth made, a point that Elizabeth made, is that it's about representing the people the companies are serving. It's about representing the world we live in. And a company, as Isabelle pointed out, can be surely more attractive, not only to clients, not only to customers, but also to talented staff when there's more diversity. And Maurice pointed out that, well, there's basically no choice because we companies now have to take into account our social responsibility. Elizabeth had a very good point. We talk about diversity, but at what level? Saying that it's one of your priorities is one thing, but making it your core strategy is another one. And she cited two very good examples, which I'm not going to reproduce here. But Sandra bounced back on this, saying it's about building, obviously, an inclusive culture. It's not just about the CEO dictating that we should do this. For women, for instance, as Sandra pointed out, that would be to be able to share views and thoughts. Can you do that, ladies, within your companies right now? Ask this. In a concrete way, for instance, Publicis decided some time ago that it's about adopting the culture of the country you're part of or you're working in. With a grassroots program, for instance. Isabelle also said that although ENGIE was doing really fine regarding cutting carbon emissions, well, it was not doing so fine into having more diversity at the top. So one concrete example is also setting up ambitions, if not crazy targets. People are telling you, no way, you're telling them, yes way, move on. Expecting the authorities to actually be effective in helping in that respect might not be something that Elizabeth is taking for granted. She believed that business leaders, and Sandra and Maurice also, and of course Isabelle, business leaders are problem solvers. This is what they do, they know. So we could actually trust them. To take this with a pinch of salt, we noted that key education, governments can help. They also can help with quotas, which, for instance, in France, have been a great accelerator. If I could finish one thing, remember what Maurice said at some point. It's about brain juice. So I'm expecting that cocktail, but with a bit of champagne. Thank you very, very, very much.